Welcome, everyone. Thanks for making it out to this live webinar about no longer saying yes when you actually want to say no. It's a very easy, just live on the spot workshop about boundaries and confidence. And I want to thank you for being here, showing up, taking the time to sit with this. If you want, you can take notes. If you also want, you can just listen to me. There's no right way to go about this. Only your way. And that's actually the thing that I feel like I'm really trying to embody in my coaching and the way that I coach people. You know, I don't know either. I got no clue if this works, how this works, whether this works, and the way that it will work for you. I don't know. I can't guarantee that it will even work. But what I do know is that there's probably a way in which you can make it work for yourself, upgrade your life a little bit, and this is possibly a way. You know, no longer saying yes when you actually want to say no. Could be interesting to try it out and see if it works, you know, and then see how you can implement it in your life. And yeah, just a little bit about me, very briefly. I have been, I do identify as a as a recovering people pleaser, and from a certain perspective, that's not even true, right? I'm still a people pleaser in some ways. I'm one that's becoming more and more aware of the ways in which I am, and it all started years ago, and it's been advice that I've been getting from my dad for a very long time. Stop pleasing others. I used to be the kid that would bend itself in all kinds of different corners and shapes and forms just to fit the expectations of other people, mostly my parents too, but also friends and teachers. And the way that I was showing up in life, it was exhausting. It was draining me, and even to the point where I would have a lot of headaches. And this was just because I was crossing my own boundaries. I was not being authentic to myself. And I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware that that was the thing, right? And yeah, I mean, I used to believe that I had to finish my studies. I used to go to parties that I didn't want to go to. I used to hold space for people when someone was talking, and I couldn't even handle it myself. I'm someone who sometimes holds in his pee when he really has to go to the bathroom, but he just doesn't want to interrupt somebody's story. Like that's me. And I remember at like age 18, 19, I quit my study psychology. Really big move, because, you know, you have to, finish your studies and then you get a job and all of this. And it just didn't fit me. And I went to travel. I went to Asia, and one of the countries that I visited was Cambodia. And something very interesting happened here. So I've been traveling Asia for about a month and a half. And when I got into Cambodia, there's this one island there where, yeah, a little side story. This island, there's no cash machines. Like there's no ATMs. And I didn't know that before I came to the island, so I didn't have any money. So I had to sleep at this hostel. And I remember going to the hostel and I had to wait for my room, and it was like a party hostel. It was super busy, so many people. And I remember that this guy came to sit next to me, and he asked me my name, and he asked me what I was doing with my life. And I told him, hey, I'm a coach, and I write children's stories. And I heard myself say that, and I had introduced myself. I had met hundreds of people in my 1.5 months in Asia. And again, I heard myself say the same introduction. And I almost got bored of myself. I was like, ugh, what am I saying? You know, yes, I'm a coach and I write children's stories, but nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. And so in that moment, I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I just played a different role? Nobody knows me here, right? So what I'm going to do is, with the next person, I'm just going to say I'm a magician. And with the other person, I said I was a biology student. And with another person, I don't know, I just made up these stories. And I remember, I said to someone, I'm a magician. And then he asked me, oh, that's so cool. Like, do a magic trick. And I was like, no. I only do that on stage, and I don't have a stage. And besides that, people pay me for it. And they laughed, and they just continued. But nobody cared. Nobody cared. And this felt so freeing. I was like, I can just be here and show up as whoever I want to show up. Wow. I might as well start showing up as myself, as what I truly do, and embody this. And so that same night was the first time that I actually introduced myself as, hey, I'm a spiritual life coach. And this was such a freeing thing to me, because I thought people had this huge idea of spirituality and that it wasn't accepted. And yeah, turns out that it was fine, that people still liked me, even though I thought they wouldn't, if I let the word spiritual shine through. And yeah, so I was wondering, also, just to get a general sense of the room, even though I can't see your hands and all of this, but who here has said something, has said yes to something this week that they kind of regretted? Just ponder upon this for yourself. And who here has ever felt a certain type of judgment on themselves for agreeing to something that they didn't want to do? Who here has felt resentment towards themselves for that? I'm curious. Sit with yourself if you've ever had that. And who here right now feels kind of too anxious to admit this to themselves, right? Because that's a thing too. And trust me, I've been there. I have been asked these types of questions, and I was like, I don't know if I want to answer these questions. It can be very helpful to do. And my intention is for you to walk away with some practical tools that will help you set boundaries, feeling confident, not feeling guilty for it, without losing the people around you, being able to stand strong within your identity. I hope that that's something that you can take away from this. And be sure to not necessarily listen for agreement. Don't listen if I say things that you agree with, because that's not what it's about. What I feel like this is about is maybe you get some insights because of this. Listen for insight. Listen for a new perspective. Listen for integration, and not so much for, he's saying the exact things I read in that other book. That's not what it's about. And so, to get right into it, a bit of a truth about boundaries. Let me break it to you. But the reason that you might feel exhausted sometimes, the reason that you feel drained, that's not because you're doing too much. And even though you might think it is, I used to have headaches a lot. I used to feel tired when I come home from school. It's not because I did so much. It's because I was doing too much of the wrong things. I was not keeping up my boundaries. I was making myself get drained because I was saying yes to things I didn't want to say yes to. And so stress, anxiety, overwhelm, all of these things, procrastination, these are signs of misalignment. These are, that's been life telling you, hey, not your path, not your path, not your path. And we're not recognizing that, right? Because we live in this society where there's expectations that are being put on us, right? We have to finish that deadline by then. We have to show up to school at that time, at that moment in this class. And so this is difficult for most people, because we have to, live in alignment with this made up version for us. And so I can see how this is difficult. And I used to be caught in that sort of trap in that sense, right? And so this whole thing is fixed, not necessarily by being like, oh, okay, well, then I'm just never going to go to school anymore. Then I'm just going to quit my job. Then I'm just going to leave my relationship. No, that's running. I'm here to serve you in a way where you can have both. You can and still have your job and enjoy it, and still be in that relationship and feel like it's serving you. And how we do that is through setting boundaries. That is through knowing where our values are at and acting in alignment with those. Because when you ask people and when you start to think about it yourself, the question, what does it mean to be authentic? I'm curious for yourself. Think about this for a few seconds. What does it mean to be authentic? The answer that I came up with, and the answer that I get reflected back to me by many people, other coaches, other clients, is being authentic means to act upon my values. And I like to add unapologetically to that. So being able to act upon my values unapologetically. And that's what it's like to be authentic. And now what do we need for that? We need to be able to act on them and know how we do that. And we need to know what our values are, and how to become aware of those. Now, we will dive into that. And this is definitely something that I dive into deeply in my 12-week program. In fact, the first lesson is all about values. It's very much about what do you value right now, and to write it all down. And you get an exercise that's accompanied with that. You can get the first module for free, as well as the first video, if you click the link in my bio if you're rewatching this later. And if you stay until the end of this one, I will give it to you too. So one of the few things that happen as to why we are too afraid to set these boundaries, to express our values, is first of all, we don't even know where they're at. That's one thing. That's not so much a fear. That's just something that's in the way. And so we'll get to that. But some fears that we have are the fear of rejection. It's like, oh, if I say no, if I say my preference, then people won't like me anymore. I'll end up lonely. In the end, I'll die as a result of that, right? That's in the end the biggest fear. We fear guilt. We fear that saying no or prioritizing ourselves means that we are being selfish, and therefore, people won't like me anymore. So they're kind of intertwined. And the third fear that comes with those is the fear of conflict. It's just easier to go along with it. It's easier to swallow it, and we'll get into that later on as well, because in fact, this conflict always exists. And then the last one is the fear of uncertainty. It's like, what if I say no and risk all of this, and then I regret that later? What if I prioritize myself, and then people become mad at me or whatever, and then later on I realize that then we again realize that we regret it. We regret saying no, for example. And two paradigm shifts that I already have for you, two things that I want to give you to ponder upon is, first one, boundaries aren't selfish. Boundaries are your birthright in that sense. It's through boundaries that you get to know yourself and that people get to know you. Your boundaries are basically your ego. It's like, this is who I am. These are my values. This is how I show up to the world. This is what I prefer. Those are your boundaries. And they can be very strict as non-negotiables. It's like, this is my boundary until here no further. Or they can be like simple preferences. It's like, hey, I like ice cream. That's a boundary. Most people don't realize that. I joke about it a lot. Like I like chocolate ice cream. It's a boundary. It's my boundary. Chocolate flavored ice cream. And this is such a great example, because whether you like chocolate flavored ice cream or not, doesn't matter. I still like it. Whatever you think of me liking it, doesn't matter. I still like it. Whether you are now willing to buy me a chocolate flavored ice cream, doesn't matter. If you buy me vanilla, I'll still love you. If you never want to buy me out of principle a chocolate flavored ice cream, also fine. Still great friends. It says nothing about how much you love me. And that's what people don't really understand about boundaries. It's they think that the moment that we express a boundary, people have to accept our boundary. And therefore, it's like we're telling them, you have to live life on my terms, which kind of makes it selfish, right? That's kind of a fucked up thing to say. Like, I don't want to hang out with you anymore if you don't do this and this and this, which can be true, right? You can choose not to hang out with people who disrespect you, but for someone not to respect your boundary, that doesn't automatically mean that they don't respect you as a person. Now, that's where the difference between non-negotiable and preference comes in, because you not liking chocolate flavored ice cream either and not wanting to eat that with me is a complete different thing than being in a romantic relationship and you cheating on me, for example, right? Two different things, but in both ways, the boundary is not respected. This goes deeper, but it is something good to be aware of, what boundaries actually are, and that setting boundaries is not selfish. It's sort of giving people the chance to meet you where you're at. You're giving them the chance to see you for who you are. You're giving them the chance for them to be like, oh, he's that type of person. I want to hang out with that type of person. Or to be like, oh, he's that type of person. Well, it doesn't align with my values. And so it might be best for us to end this relationship, or for you to leave this job, or for me to quit my studies or go study something else, or whatever. And the second thing is that every time you ignore your boundaries, you're telling yourself that your needs don't matter. And this is why it's such a difficult thing to change, because there's a lot of people who are completely stuck in their paradigm, in their conditioning. At some point in life, we have learned that not setting boundaries was great for our survival, right? Basically, we really feel this need to be liked, to fit in. It's how we've grown up. This is all wired back into the old days, where we would be part of tribes, and if you didn't agree with what the tribe was doing, you would be kicked out of the tribe. You lived in the jungle, and so being alone meant being eaten, and therefore being kicked out of the tribe meant death. And therefore, we've been wired to people please. We've been wired to make ourselves fit in as best as possible. Now, because that has served us until some point, it's now not really serving us anymore, right? What got you here won't get you there. And now we're in this process of realizing that, yeah, this people pleasing might not be serving me anymore. I really, want to find my own authentic way of living right now. And that, that brings up fears. But because we've been reinforcing this non-boundary type of life, and it's gotten us all the way here, we've basically learned this is the safest way to be. And therefore, what I just want to add here in the beginning of this webinar is that after this, it's not changed. You're not fixed. You're never broken. But it's not that right now, after this, you'll be able to set boundaries everywhere. You're never, that won't happen. Let me really manage your expectations there. I'm sorry to break it to you, but this is a constant practice of realizing that, yeah, you might be allowing people to cross your boundaries, and that is completely fine as long as you're aware of it. And so this process isn't just going to change like that, because we've been conditioned, we've been conditioned to ignore our boundaries, and therefore we've been telling ourselves that our needs don't matter. It's how we've been grown up. It's how we've been conditioned. But just realize that this is still the case. From now on, every time you ignore your boundaries, you're telling yourself that your needs don't matter. And so you better not ignore your boundaries anymore. And as a very quick exercise to do here for 2 minutes is think about the last time you said yes to something when you actually wanted to say no. And if you have that scenario in mind, ask yourself how that felt. How did you feel doing that? And when you've shown some awareness on that, ask yourself, what did that cost you? What was the cost of doing so? And just sit with that. And if you want, you can take a pen and a piece of paper and just journal on this for just a moment, and then we'll just continue. And so now, as we continue, we're going to do a little mindset reframing. Let's realize for a moment that conflict is not the problem. What we think we're doing when we're people pleasing is that we're avoiding conflict. That's our, that's our motivator, right? It's like, ooh, if I speak up about this, I'll either, feel guilty, I will be judged, I will be resented, I will not be liked, I'll end up lonely, all of these things. That's like conflict. But what's actually happening is that when our boundaries are being crossed, when we're saying yes to something that we actually want to say no to, we think that thereby we're avoiding conflict, when in fact, that's not true. What's happening is that now the conflict is not here. It's not between you and me. Because let's say I were to say no, when I actually wanted to say no, I would feel like I would be hurting you, and you would be mad at me. And so there would be this conflict where you'd be like, no, but you have to do that. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. Conflict. And so what I've learned to do is I'll swallow it. I'll just not say no. So you'll be like, please do that. And I'll be like, yeah, okay. But the truth here is that now this conflict goes from here. Now I'm the one dealing with the conflict. I'm not bothering you with it because I don't want you to feel your feelings. And this is me pleasing you by keeping it all inside, resenting myself for doing so. And now there's this big conflict in me because I just said yes to something that I actually don't want to do. And that is the truth that most people overlook. It's that this conflict is there regardless. This conflict is there because my values are not in alignment with my actions. And either the conflict's out there or the conflict's in here. And people pleasers have grown so comfortable with the conflict being in here. We love that. But what's actually happening, and what this is saying, is that we're abandoning parts of ourselves. We're not being true to ourselves. We're just living with this. We've learned to swallow it. And it's exhausting. It's so exhausting. But what we think as people pleasers is that this is less exhausting than putting it out there here. And the truth is, it's not. It's not. Because our boundaries don't create conflict. Speaking up doesn't create conflict. It reveals the conflict that's already there. And with that, with revealing it, and that's the secret sauce here that most of us don't realize, by revealing it and throwing it out there in the open, that's when we create space to solve it, to fix it. Because the truth is, nobody wants you to do things that you actually genuinely really don't want to do. Sure, when you were in high school or in school, you had to do your homework and all of these things. Sometimes your parents made you do the dishes, all of those things. But you're a grown up right now. You're a grown up, and so stop letting your inner child determine your experiences. Because the kid that learned all of that, are you really going to trust that kid? In some aspects, yes, I'm really pro shadow or inner child work, shadow work too. But right now, what you're doing is you're playing it small because you've learned that that's safe. And so, yeah, boundaries don't create conflict; they reveal it. And by revealing it, we get to solve it. That's when we put it out there in the open. And nobody wants us to do things we actually don't want to do. That meaning that, let's say you were to ask me to do something I don't want to do, and I tell you, hey, listen, I really don't want to do that. Are you going to be like, fuck you, you're selfish? No. Either you'll understand, you'll be like, all right, fine, I'll ask someone else. Or you'll get curious. It's like, hey, interesting. Is there a way, that we can maybe find a middle way? Is there anything else we can do about that? How can we make it easier? People are nice. And so even if they were not to react nicely, right? And throw that conflict out there and really react like, fuck you, you're really not supposed to say that. You have to do this for me. It brings the conflict here. Be happy that they do that. Because maybe they're pleasing you by swallowing that, And so as long as the conflict's out here, communication will solve it. And so that's where it becomes important that you're aware of your values and that the other person is aware of their values too, right? And so, if you happen to get into this huge argument, huge conflict, just send them to this video and then you'll both be able to figure it out. Therefore, yeah, it's important to be in contact with your own personal values to be able to solve that conflict and to talk about it and to communicate about it. And that's truly what it's about. This mindset reframe of boundaries don't create conflict, they reveal it. And by revealing it, you get to solve it. And that's the great thing about saying no, right? It makes you transparent. People know what to do. They know how to rely on you. They'll love you for it, right? At some point, they'll praise you for it. Maybe immediately, maybe later on, but they'll praise you for the fact that you just, portraying your values, sharing your boundaries. And to get into the next thing, another misconception a lot of people have is that boundaries are about manipulating other people, which is actually not true. It's the opposite. Not setting any boundaries is about manipulating other people. Because by not setting boundaries, I am in control of how you perceive me. And that's what most people pleasers also don't realize, is people pleasers are the biggest manipulators. Because what they're doing is they're swallowing parts of themselves so that you'll perceive them in a different way. And we do that so we feel safe, because then we're liked. Oh, as long as I don't say no to you when you want me to do something, you'll like me. And I really want to be liked. And so I'll just have this inner conflict of doing things I actually don't want to do so that I get the satisfaction of being liked, which is bigger than the conflict. My pain of doing things I don't want to do is smaller than my pain of confronting you with the fact that I don't want to do that, risking that you'll then not like me anymore. It's the ultimate people pleaser thing, and it's so interesting. And so boundaries are not about controlling others. Boundaries are not manipulative. They are the opposite, because now you get to give people a choice. You now give them the choice on how they want to respond to you. And so this chocolate ice cream example, let's say you were to give me a strawberry ice cream, and I don't like strawberry ice cream. What I would do as a people pleaser is be like, oh, thank you so much, I really appreciate that, blah blah, I love it, and then I would eat the ice cream being like, this is absolutely disgusting, but I'm not going to say it. That's people pleaser. You might think that that's great and that that's not manipulative and that that's nice and kind, but is it? Because now I'm having this whole entire conflict. I'm not being authentic to myself. I'm pleasing you because I'm afraid that if I say, hey, I don't like this ice cream, you'll get offended and you'll see me as a bad person. The best way to do this and to go about this boundary setting is with radical honesty. Thank you so much for offering me the ice cream. I'm really not a fan of chocolate of strawberry ice cream, but thank you for thinking of me. I'm not going to eat it. And now this might be like, this might seem as though you're controlling them, that you're being ungrateful, that you're being like all of this. But it's not true, because what this does is that now next time they want to buy you a gift, they'll know not to buy you strawberry ice cream. Boundaries reveal the stuff. They clean everything up, because what can happen if you don't say that you didn't like it? Next time they'll give you it again. They'll give you strawberry ice cream again, and then they'll give you a whole strawberry tree, and then they'll, it's a very interesting game to be playing, and this whole, it all just comes down on radical honesty and being radically honest. And so right now, to continue this and to really make it practical for you to be able to stop saying yes when you actually want to say no, is by finding a way in which you can tell people no without feeling like you're being a dick. Because that's basically the biggest fear here, is that we're afraid that we'll come off as selfish, that we'll come across as all of these things that we see negative, right? And that's okay, because this is in the communication skills. If you have great communication skills, it's easier for you to set up boundaries. And I'm aware of that. And I have had the privilege to be, I won't say born with, because I don't think you're born with good communication skills, but I have developed into a human with pretty good communication skills. I'm verbally very strong. And I have therefore taken a look at the ways in which I portray my boundaries, the ways in which I say no to people when they want me to do something, when they want me to do something that I don't want to do. And the best way for me to do that is through a 3-step formula. If you want to receive this formula in a PDF format, I created like a little booklet, little ebook. It's free. You can download it. You don't really need it if you go through this, but it's got some extra little quirks in there. You can also find that in the description below, or I'll send it in the chat for you guys in a moment. The 3-step formula is, it's kind of like a script for setting boundaries without feeling guilty. Is appreciate, explain, alternative. AEA. What that looks like is, I appreciate the invite, but I won't be joining this time. Now, let me grab the booklet so I can really go in depth into this for just a moment. The booklet is called Authentic Boundaries. It's about a little over 10 pages, in which I teach you all about boundaries and a little script on how to do it and how not to do it. So this is a literal example from the booklet. Let's say somebody invites you for a social invitation. It's a social invitation. They want you to come somewhere and you want to say no. Old me, and probably old you, would just say, sorry, I can't make it. Or come up with some kind of excuse or some white lie to let them know that you're not coming. And while there's nothing wrong with saying, sorry, I can't make it. I've done that before and it all worked out. People find fine. It can be scary at first because it's easy to be perceived as rude, when you say, sorry, I can't make it. And so what to say instead is the 3-step formula: acknowledge, explain, alternative. Hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. I really appreciate the invite. I've been prioritizing some alone time lately, so I won't be joining this time. But I would love to catch up for a coffee next week if you're up for it. Now, a little caveat here about the alternative. If you offer another option, because that's what it is. We have the acknowledgement, which is showing appreciation for the request. We have the explanation, which is briefly sharing your preference without over-explaining. And we have the alternative, offering another option, but only if you genuinely want to. I've made this mistake where I would tell people, this whole thing, and I would tell them, and I'll update you next week. And then it was next week, and I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to talk to this person. I don't want to talk to this person, but I said that I would. And now I'm in the same thing again. I'm just postponing my confrontation. So don't do that. Another example. So pay attention if you can find where the acknowledgement, what the explanation is, and where you'll find the alternative. Example is, hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. I really appreciate the invite. I don't feel in a social mood today, so I won't be joining this time. But I'd love to catch up for a coffee next week if you're up for it. It's an interesting one. And maybe another one. Hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. I really appreciate the invite. The people that will be there aren't really my kind of people, so I won't prioritize it. So I won't be prioritizing this at this time. Don't count on me for another time either. I'm changing things up in my life, and I won't be prioritizing our social gatherings for a while. I know where to find you. Now, these things might seem harsh, but I really, and everyone else actually, prefer clarity over fucking lies and vague shit. Like, and you'll really become this type of person too, I hope, after a while when you start to practice this. I just want things to be clear. I'd rather hear from someone, I don't want to hang out with you anymore, than I'm busy and I have this and I have that priority, and I'm like, oh, and then, find out that they were at this other party. It's like, be upfront, own your shit, own yourself. That's the most confident thing you can do. Just be real with me and with anyone in your life, because by doing so, you'll allow yourself the opportunity to create a life that absolutely lines up with your preferences, with your values, with your type of people. Because if you don't talk about your values, if you don't talk about your boundaries, if you don't talk about your preferences, then how are you ever going to expect anyone to fit those? How are you ever going to expect life to know what to give you if you're too afraid to ask for it, if you're too afraid to get it? Because if you keep on telling people, thank you so much, I love this, after you receive a strawberry ice cream when you actually don't like strawberries, you're going to keep on getting strawberry ice creams. And this will only end the moment where you're willing to stand up for yourself and tell everyone, hey guys, I don't like strawberry ice cream, but thank you so much for buying them. Maybe buy me chocolate ice cream. Those I do like. This is the simplicity of it. This is how it works. This is the way in which you can stop saying yes to things that you actually don't want to go to, or any other types of things, right? It's not just going to parties. This is a ton of things. This is so much, helping. I don't know. I don't even want to come up with all these examples because they're easy. And I'd like you to do that right now. Take like a minute to come up with an example for yourself in which you can utilize this formula that I just gave you. What is your, strawberry ice cream? What's that thing that you've been saying yes to for a very long time that you actually want to say no to? Take a moment to write it down. And when you've done that, write down the way in which you can potentially, you don't have to do this, but where you could potentially express your boundary, tell people that you don't want to do that thing respectfully using the formula. Again, acknowledgement, explanation, alternative. Just take a few seconds to do that. And as you're in the process of doing that, let's take a little step further and see if you can journal on whether you will be able to set that boundary this week. How can you create that opportunity for yourself, or how will you maybe find yourself in that opportunity already to express this new boundary? To tell people this. Hey, I don't like strawberry ice cream. It's gonna stay my example. I love the example. Yeah, just take a moment to write it down. Yes, and when you've done that, my little final words, little reminders of the stuff that we went over in this very brief but possibly very helpful online webinar. It's going to be a series, so I'm going to be doing more of these. Just as some final words and some things. First of all, I'm curious. What were your insights? What was your biggest insight from this? What are you taking away from listening to me, from going through the exercises. How is your life no longer the same after watching this? And as you're doing that, I'll go over some of the points that I think are important to remember. And that is that boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about allowing yourself to feel free. Boundaries are not the thing that create conflict. Boundaries reveal it. And every time that you make the decision to live and act in alignment with yourself, you're strengthening your ability to create the life that you actually want. You'll be able to live stress-free, all of these things. And yeah, I mean, if this is something that you benefited from, be sure to drop a comment if you're rewatching this. And thank you guys for all being here. If you guys want to take it a step further, you know how to find me for possibly one-on-one coaching, from following my program. Yeah, everyone who isn't yet, join my 12-week program in which we're going in depth on all of this stuff, on being able to create boundaries and create a lifestyle that serves you, that suits you, that's just in authentic alignment with yourself, right? No more stress, no more worries, no more problems, no more feeling drained and overwhelmed and all of these things, but a life that's really been living on your terms, where you get to choose instead of respond and react and feel like you have too less time on your hands. Thank you for being here. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate your time and efforts. I really appreciate the ways that you guys participated in this event. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next one. There's a bunch of crows flying above, like a big swarm of crows. I think it's called a, how do we call that? How do we call a group of crows? Wait, let me, unless anybody knows it, right? A murder. Thank you. Yes, a murder. A big murder passing by a window right now. Doesn't matter. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you, and see you next time.